it's a manifestation of a mental health crisis.
Yep.
People are losing their lives because we're not addressing mental health in our culture, in our society. But to the outsider who's maybe never used drugs, it looks like, oh, it's just people making bad choices. And that's not at all what it is. It's people that are desperate to stay afloat.
I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Hey everybody, Ron here from The Truth About Addiction. Today we've got a young chap from the United States of America, Mr. Jake Yoder. Jake, thank you for coming to The Truth About Addiction, my friend. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your story. So please, what's the Jake Yoder story?
Well, addiction for me started pretty young. It started at 14 years old, and it was quite a different journey from, I think, a lot of the sort of classic idea of addiction. You know, people talk about like addiction doesn't discriminate. And I think this is a good example of the fact that like it really can show up in a lot of different ways. You know, I had a chance to just look at a little bit of, what you've shared about your own story, Ron, before coming on here. And my journey was very different. I actually had a great childhood the way that I see it. I had, really loving parents, and I had um, a pretty safe environment. And I have pretty good memories of childhood. Um, but I don't remember any real sort of nuanced conversations about substances or addiction or like what to look out for. All I remember is that there was a DARE officer in the States. We have this program that's like run by the government that they send somebody into the school to show you, footage of gang violence or drug abuse and try to scare you out of, doing drugs. But the problem is that, when I was first introduced to marijuana when I was 14 years old, it was my older sister and her boyfriend at the time, and they were people that I looked up to and I loved and I trusted, and they were saying, hey, this got to try this thing. And I was really curious, and I had a part of me that really wanted to explore. And it wasn't anything like the videos, right, that the police officer showed us in school. So really quickly I was like, well, there doesn't seem like there's anything wrong here. And I think that's one of the challenges with marijuana specifically, is it can really seem so harmless. But then for me, Ron, it progressed really quickly. Like as soon as I tried it, I loved it. And I think within a week I was selling it so that I could have my own supply. And it was just game over from there. I mean, I had no reason that I knew of to why I would put any kind of barrier on this or any kind of boundary on this. I just figured I would do it as much as I wanted. And then for 6 years, I ended up doing that, and I did it every day. And I used it quite heavily, morning, noon, and night. And for a long time, I don't think I really realized the impact that it was having. I didn't know that I was medicating severe anxiety from changes that were going on in my life with moving towns and moving schools and being in a high school environment that was very unsettling to my nervous system. And so, we're in my journey, I didn't have like these big, obvious traumas, but I did have feelings that I didn't know how to deal with, and I didn't know that I should be dealing with them or that there was any alternative. I just sort of was using marijuana and felt like uh, there was nothing to worry about. It wasn't until years later that I realized that I've been in denial about the fact that I had pretty severe anxiety and fear and some OCD kind of tendencies, even within my own mind. And I was actually medicating what I think would be pretty easily diagnosed as, these different sort of disorders, anxiety disorders, if you will. Um, and that didn't even become clear to me until after I already stopped using marijuana. And I had started to drink and use psychedelics and use cocaine and use prescription pills, and it progressed to the point where at the end of my addiction, I was no longer just a stoner kid. I was crushing up pills on the nightstand the night before, so that in the morning I could wake up and just roll over and use those drugs to help me get out of bed. And that's where I ended up. And I never thought that I would do that. I never thought I would end up there. I never intended to. And I always thought I would never do powders or pills. And somehow I found myself there.
Yeah. Like most people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
You don't start out planning on it, right?
Yeah. Bit of pot can't hurt anybody. I remember smoking pot. That was my gateway into drugs was pot, and I loved it. I'm old, so we used to buy £100 a pot for $10,000 back in the day. We sold it $25 an ounce, so it was a profit. It was a business, But we smoked, and we smoked a lot, and I'd wake up and I'd have a joint. And then I'd roll 10 joints and put them in a cigarette packet and put them on the top pocket. When I'd walk around the streets, I'd just smoke joints. I didn't want to smoke cigarettes. We never mixed tobacco with our pot those days. But I thought it was a social drug. We listened to music, we would get to someone's house, we put Pink Floyd on. But the trouble was that I found Dark Side of the Spoon, not Dark Side of the Moon. I started using heroin. And most of the heroin became part of my life. The pot went out the window. Everything went out the window, because once you're driving a Ferrari, you don't want to get back inside of a Volkswagen. And for me, heroin was the Ferrari, because it was so instantaneous. You inject that shit, and just, Lou Reed said, when I put a spike into my vein, things aren't quite the same. And that was the era I grew up in, But people underestimate marijuana a great deal. The effects, the side effects, the damage, and the cognitive stuff of marijuana abuse is incredible, especially today with the new hydroponics, all the chemicals they're putting into it. My years of being working in the industry of drug and alcohol, I can usually tell if someone's been if they're a pot smoker. I can usually tell if they're an ice head, if they're a coke user, if they're an alcoholic, and just by the damage that I see in that human being. And marijuana was one of the worst of them. For the mental damage it was doing. People don't understand that through marijuana abuse you can go into psychosis. People are like, what? That's only on ice, isn't it? I say, no. People go into full psychosis on marijuana. And there's a lot of myths about marijuana being harmless. But the thing that made me really smile in the beginning of the story was how they come in and show you this video of, like The Man with the Golden Arm was a movie they showed. This guy's injecting heroin back in the 70s, and he's crazy and all this shit. Mate, I injected heroin just laid on the couch. So it was the movie and the reality was just so far fetched. And I remember seeing them smoking marijuana and turning into monsters in all this crazy stuff in the old 60s and 70s movies, and their way of trying to scare us. And I actually found it more attractive when I seen that, their anti-drug campaigns become attractive. So we have to be really aware of what message we carry, and I think the government have missed the boat again, and still miss the boat when it comes to drug awareness and drug education. I think that, the war on drugs is a joke. You can't have a war on drugs when you've got the soldiers on this side selling and running the dope as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the biggest drug dealers in Australia have been government officials, law enforcement. I don't know about America. I lived in America for 20 years on and off, and I'm quite sure the stories I used to hear about the DEA bringing coke over before Mexico became involved with a lot of the drug smuggling. It was always pot coming from Mexico. It wasn't coke and that. Then the cartels moved into Mexico and all that stuff. You see, and I say this with a small amount of shame and guilt, I guess, that I was an organised crime person, so I understand the logistics of drug smuggling throughout the world, and I watched it change in America. I lived in America, and I watched the drug culture change, because pot was always the big thing coming out of Mexico. All the pot was coming from Mexico. Now all the ice and all the cocaine, all the heroin's coming from Mexico. And it's quite sad that they keep talking about stopping the immigrants. Well, what about letting the immigrants in and stopping the drugs? Concentrate on the drugs, not the immigrants. No.
Right. Somehow I think the people who are trying to be anti-immigration will just try to conflate the two and just be like, oh, the immigrants and the drugs, like as if it's one thing, as if the people are the drugs.
Yeah.
But those are two separate issues. It's not like the people coming over to seek refuge are like the ones that are bringing the drugs in themselves, and we have a huge fentanyl problem and a huge opioid problem in America and throughout the world, to my understanding right now. But I don't think that anything really yet that the United States has done to try to address it is really quite working. I mean, to my knowledge, things are continuing to kind of get worse. And that's really scary. And I think it's easy for people to turn away from that issue because it looks like, oh, that's people ruining their own lives, but that's not at all what's happening. And so it's frustrating to try to advocate, as I'm sure for that particular issue, because at the end of the day, like the reality of it is it's a manifestation of a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
People are losing their lives because we're not addressing mental health in our culture, in our society. But to the outsider who's maybe never used drugs, it looks like, oh, it's just people making bad choices. And that's not at all what it is. It's people that are desperate to stay afloat and desperate to feel a little bit better. And every human being reaches for things outside of themselves to try to feel better. That's what I was doing before I had the awareness to do it any differently. There was a time in my life where that was all I knew how to do. And it's human to reach for something outside of yourself. And I think when it comes to drugs, whether it's cannabis or Oxycontin or heroin or whatever it is, it's just we're that much more desperate to feel better. People are struggling that much more and needing something to help them get by. So it's like anybody who's ever reached for a cookie or a coffee, I would just, I mean, whoever's listening out there, to relate from that place of like, of course, we're all human. We all look for something to try to help us feel a little bit better. But if somebody's struggling more, they're going to need something a bit stronger. And that's where it becomes a real, problem and a threat nowadays, especially nowadays, a threat to people's lives.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And also, they think they're just junkies. No, they're our future society. That's our future. Those kids that are on the streets shooting fentanyl and having these incredibly hard lives and using these filthy chemicals, they are going to be fathers and mothers of the children of the fathers and mothers of the children of the fathers and mothers of the children, which is going through a generation. I'm 70 years of age soon. I've watched this change. I've watched the generational change of drug abuse. Because when I was a kid, there was no drugs. When I started using heroin, there was no education. There was no Narcotics Anonymous in Australia when I started using drugs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was AA, but there was no 12-step program in Australia for drug addicts. And when I went to AA in the late 70s, I was told not to share about my drug addiction. So they addressed
Mm-hmm.
alcohol, because they called alcohol their problem.
Mm-hmm.
And they never talked about addictions being a mental health issue.
Right.
And it is a mental health issue. In the late 80s, the AMA in America recognised that drug addiction was a mental health problem. And lots of people came along with their medical insurance and said, okay, we need treatment. And the government backtracked and said, oh, wait, we might have been a bit early on this. Maybe it's not a mental health problem because of the cost.
Right.
Now I believe they've gone back and said, okay, it is a mental health problem. But, you know, people don't understand that alcoholism and drug addiction affects every family in the world, indirectly or directly. It's either, you know, it's like the ripple effect. You throw a stone in the river and the ripple goes out everywhere. And then if I've got a cousin who just hung himself because he was a drug addict, it still affects my family. It affects my wife's family because this is all our family. Even though it might be related, you know, 3 generations, you know, cousin, it still affects us. Oh, do you remember our cousin Billy? He hung himself in prison. He was a fentanyl addict or a drug addict. He was this or whatever. So it does affect us all, and it also affects us because our health insurance has gone up so much because of the addiction. It affects us because the crime's gone up so much because of them trying to keep their habits. So it's affecting society as a whole.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the answer to that is not just locking the drug user up, you know, stop the demand and you stop the supply.
Yeah.
How do you stop the demand? By education, not by
Yeah.
punishment.
Yeah. It has to start so much further upstream
Mm.
than what we're currently doing. And here in Santa Cruz, you know, I live in California. It's funny because when I was, you know, when I was selling marijuana, I was on the East Coast. I grew up on the East Coast of the United States, and we would get it shipped from California,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
like where it was being grown. And we would like, you know, oh man, there's this like we're getting this weed from California. And now you know, it's been over 10 years. I haven't used marijuana in over 10 years, and now I live over in California, and you know, I can't walk outside without smelling it. It's everywhere here, and it's legal, and it's very pervasive, and you know, it's mixed in with you know, yeah, it's just at this time I've seen where I live, the homelessness and the devastation has just visibly amplified. I mean, there are trails now that I used to walk to from my house that I no longer use because there are people camped out on the trail, and it just doesn't feel safe anymore. And there's just these huge homeless encampments popping up in California in this area, and they're getting bigger and bigger, and they're starting to take over public spaces. So, you know, as far as it affecting society as a whole, yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, you know, I can't just say, oh, you know, I've been in recovery for 10 years now, I'm good, you know, when now I'm a citizen. Yeah, I don't use drugs anymore, but I don't go to certain places, public land, public places, public trails that are maintained by my tax dollars. I won't use anymore because it's no longer safe there. So it's like, yeah, it does affect society as a whole, you
yeah.
know?
And it's going to get worse because we're not addressing it. We're not really being proactive because punishment doesn't work. Okay, this is my argument. If we've had this war on crime for the last 30 years and we're losing it, maybe we need to change our strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but if I was the general of that army, I'd be looking for a different way in.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, we've spent all these trillions of dollars on the war on crime by getting more law enforcement, more border security, more this, more that, more this, more that, and we're losing. Well, maybe we should start looking at education.
Mm-hmm.
Taking away the demand will kill the supply. They're trying to stop the supply. We're never going to stop the supply. There's too much money in it.
Right.
And money's God. Let's be honest. Everything's about money, you know. I remember, because I lived in LA, you know, I'd go and stay. My best friend owned a tattoo studio on Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood. So I'd stay in the Hilton Hotel and I'd call my ex-wife every day for about 2 weeks while I was over there. And it cost me $1,200 or $1,500 in phone calls, you know. Now today I'm on Zoom, it's costing me nothing.
Right.
But I have to have all these apparatuses, these computers, these phones, and everything that's completely controlling our lives. And you know, I don't know about you, but you go on your phone, it tells you how many hours you've had screen time and all that sort of craziness. That's going to be our new addiction.
Right. I mean, that's definitely another addiction,
Yeah,
definitely another big thing to address, especially in terms of education. I mean, that one is so important to catch early. Um, I think, how to raise kids in today's world and navigate the technology that's available. That's a huge thing that we have a lot of catching up to do with that. Now, it's just so new and it's having such an impact on attention spans. And I think that, that's a huge, huge, huge cause of it primes children for addictive tendencies.
yep.
And that to me is really scary. And that's something to definitely get out ahead of, you know,
I have a
when it comes
4-year-old
to
and an
education.
8-year-old. I have
Yeah.
a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. When I take them off their iPads, they get angry at me.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, we have a mood changing apparatus in front of them. This would govern
Yeah.
my mood. So now,
Mm-hmm.
what we used to take drugs to govern, now our children are using social media and internet and YouTube and Facebook and bloody, I don't even know half, and Snapchat and TikTok, and my
Right.
mind boggles. You got to remember, I'm old, and I went back to prison for 10 years, between 2002 and 2012, when all this technology came out. It freaked me out.
Yeah.
It was mind
Well,
boggling, and still is today. It still overwhelms me today. You know, and I've been home 12 years. It still
mhm.
overwhelms me today, the fact that, you know, iPhones weren't around when I went to jail. I came out and somebody gave me an iPhone and said, oh, I've got you on Facebook. I put you on a dating site and I've done this and I've done that. I'm like, what the hell? And my phone beeped every couple of minutes for 24 hours because all these people were sending friend requests. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know how to turn the phone off. You know, technology changed so much, you know.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
back to Jake's story about Jake, what made you stop using?
So when I started, I was 14. When I stopped, I was almost 20. Um, so I stopped pretty young, but I also started pretty young. Um, you know, I was in school and I was studying anthropology, and I had an idea that I wanted to do something to help humanity evolve and solve some of our social issues and the causes of our suffering. And that was really, really important to me, but I just had no idea where to start or what my path was going to look like. I didn't know whether to study business or whether to study, become a social worker or study environmental science. And I realized that as I was trying to figure out my path, if I was also smoking weed every morning and every lunchtime and every night, and I was also partying 3 or 4 days out of the week and drinking and using psychedelics and like that lifestyle that I had in college, it was incompatible with really getting clear on my path and who I wanted to be in the world. Even just marijuana, even when I kind of calmed everything down and I was just smoking marijuana, smoking tobacco, my life was so centered around using those substances. I couldn't get deeper into myself. I couldn't get the clarity that I needed to
Yeah.
make decisions and trust those decisions. So if I'm all foggy in the head and I'm trying to figure out my life path and I can't trust the decisions that I make, I can't really move forward. And so if the idea of that started to freak me out so much, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to be the person I wanted to be in the world or make the contribution that I feel called to make. And it just became clear to me that, yeah, it was scary to stop, but it was actually already, I mean, maybe stopping all of my substance use seemed difficult in a way, but I realized that what I was already doing, the addictions that I was in, that was already difficult. That was already painful.
Yeah.
That was already not working. So I think the realization that really got me out of it, Ron, was I realized that what I was already doing was more painful and more difficult than making the change. And so, to be honest, I actually got quite excited and inspired. And I felt a big relief when I got sober because it felt like I was sort of, you know, nothing new was happening. I was running in circles. I was sort of banging my head against a wall. And when I got sober, it was like, okay, now I have a path forward. Now I realize that to find my path in life, I need to work on myself. So now I know what to do next. And it was a huge relief for me. And it was very spiritual for me. I felt as though my spiritual connection really took over. It came in and uh, it became really the guiding force of my life. And I suppose what I mean by that is that I became willing to step outside of my own thinking and the things that I thought were correct and the ways that I wanted to do things and the way that my ego wanted to use substances. And I started to become open to new perspectives. And I started to let my body kind of lead. It's like the body has this intelligence because we're from nature. So, to me, like the idea of nature or the universe or God, it's sort of really all one thing for me. And I know that I'm also that. I'm also, that's in me, that guides me, that my flesh and bone has risen from the earth and from the universe. And so to me, like, myself and the greater forces aren't separate, it's within me. And I started to learn how to listen to that and let that, it really guided me to make healthier choices, and it made it easier to not use because I felt connected to something much bigger than myself. um Bigger than me, but also within me, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%.
And yeah, yeah, and
100%.
that just made it, it felt like I could really trust that force. So it was kind of a relief, to be honest. I was like, oh, thank God I don't have to do this myself.
That's a very intelligent decision. It's true. It is. That's a very intelligent decision. And you had what I call a momentary lapse of reason, of clarity.
Yeah,
That's true. That's,
yeah,
Pink Floyd brought out an album and brought out a song that's called Momentary Lapse of Reason. And it's the truth. I knew on my last relapse that if I continued to use, my life would get worse. And if I was to stop, my life would get better. And it was exciting knowing that my life would get better. Because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so I got excited about my recovery. And I'm 38 years clean. And
Wow.
and you know, that's a long fucking time.
Yeah.
You know, and I say that one day at a time. And I don't say that, I say by the grace of a loving higher power. I don't use the word God. So I believe what you said, there's a lot of stuff I relate to. My universe is my God, but my God is inside of me. And if I connect to my universe and I connect my spirit to the Holy Spirit of the universe, all will be well. And when I go against my honest belief system, not my ego belief system, all will be well. I never have difficulty in achieving the things that I'm meant to achieve. The struggle comes from me going against my higher power's will for me. That's where the struggle and the confusion and the desperation comes into my life. Everything I have today is a direct result of helping other people. So the more I give, the more I receive. It's not my motivation for doing what I do, but it's the reward.
Right.
And I believe human beings, there has to be a payoff. That's human nature. We eat food so we stay alive. We drink water so we stay alive. There's a payoff in everything we do. We breathe air so we stay alive. So for every action we have a payoff. And I believe there has to be a payoff, even though that can't be your motivation. Your intention is so important. I believe my intentions are more important than my actions. If I'm doing this podcast because I want followers and I want ego, my ego wants followers. I couldn't care less.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
I couldn't care less. If one person hears this podcast and gets something out of it, we've achieved our purpose. It's all about purpose. What is my purpose in life? My purpose is to be a teacher, to carry a message of hope, that there is hope. I stopped, so you can stop. I've done these things that were bad, but okay, so what? I'm a human being, and then I'm a male, and then I'm an addict. And for years, I was just an addict. I focused on the addiction, the ways and means to get more. My whole life revolved around getting stoned. Why? Because I didn't know how to be a human. So if I didn't know how to be a human, the male side of me, the ego, liked to be the man. I wanted to be the drug dealer. I wanted to have control. I wanted to have power. And today, I have so much control of nothing. And it's so beautiful. It is so beautiful to have complete control of nothing. Because I'm powerless over people, places, and things. The only thing I control is my actions, my reactions, the way I perceive things, and the way I plant seeds for my future. Because nothing grows instantaneously. The quick fix is gone.
Yeah,
Today,
I was.
go on.
You make such a good point about control and the way that that's tied into addiction. I think I really wanted to control things also in my addiction. Like even just the way that I feel. Like I wanted to like control the way that I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. What okay, we're gonna go out to a discotheque tonight. Let's take some acid. Okay, we're gonna go and chat some chicks up. Let's take some speed because it will last longer in bed. Okay, we're gonna chill out on the couch. Let's take some pot or some hash or some heroin. We controlled our mood by the chemical we took. You know, and I was fully aware of that. Like, okay, we're going to a nightclub, let's take some acid. Because now we're going to be diving, you know, we're going to be kicking it. And it was like this false sense of I need this to be able to perform this. And over the last 40, I've been in recovery now since 1981, so it's a bloody long time, 42 years. And I've been to nightclubs and I've been to all these places. I went and seen Pink Floyd straight. I was about 2 years clean. And I watched,
Nice.
and Pink Floyd's my favourite band in the world. And I watched them live and I thought, now I know why I took drugs. And I was straight. But that actual concert was like, I was hallucinating, man. It was like so out of control. The visuals, the sound, the atmosphere was like, wow, now I know this is the drug I chased when I was taking drugs. And
Uh-huh.
I was completely straight.
Yeah.
And I went and
Yeah.
seen all these bands. I went through a stage in the 80s when I got clean. I went and seen Prince, Michael Jackson, Pink Floyd, ZZ Top. And like, there's a whole bunch of bands. I just went and seen them all because in active addiction, you don't go and see anybody.
Right.
You sit at home and think about going to see people.
Oh man, I missed one of my favorite bands at a festival because I was doing drugs in a tent. And
Yeah.
it was like, it would have been like a 10-minute walk to the stage. I was at the festival, camped out for the weekend. And the band that I was the most excited about, I'm a hip hop fan. So the Roots is like, it's not like mainstream hip hop. It's like very poetic
Yeah.
hip hop. And man, I was so excited to see them play, and I just totally missed it because I was doing ketamine in a tent,
Yeah.
and I got so messed up I couldn't leave the tent. And by the time I came to, I just was like, oh yeah, that the whole set is over. Just and it's like that was such a perfect little encapsulation for me of choosing the drugs versus the life experiences.
Yeah.
It really does make your world small. It makes your world small. Like, I mean, I could say yeah, I would mix in these adventures and I would still go hiking or rock climbing. And I'm really obsessed with rock climbing. But I do so much more now that I'm completely clean and sober from everything. Like, I do so much more climbing. I do so much more mountaineering. I go into the wilderness so much more. I've become a better athlete in all of the sports that I do. When I was using, I like had the identity. I was like attached to the identity of being a climber and being an athlete because I would go climbing once a month or something, or I would, mountain bike every couple of months or whatever, like I would say, oh yeah, I do all these things, but it was like, once a month instead of twice a week. When I
Yeah.
look at my life now, it's like I'm really doing the things that I love, that I'm passionate about, and improving at them.
Yeah.
And I get to share those experiences with other people. And I get to also experience, I think, so much more um, the quality of the experience is so much greater because I'm actually honoring this life by getting out into the mountains
Yeah.
versus sitting, being in a ketamine induced, trance in a
Oh,
tent or like just
no.
stoned on the couch. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
there's just so much more to life.
I always think about that song, I got stoned and I missed it. You know that song? There's a song that says, I got stoned and I missed it. I got stoned and
Oh
I missed
yeah, I
it.
think I
I got
do
stoned
actually.
and my life went right by. It's an old song and it just reminds me of active addiction. I got stoned and I missed it. Yeah.
Oh
My
yeah,
life
there's
just
also
went by.
one. I don't know if it's the same song or a different one. There's like, but then I got high. It's like I was gonna clean my room,
Yeah,
but
and then
then
I
I
got
got
high. That's
high.
another one. Yeah.
Yeah,
I send that to
exactly,
people.
man.
I send that song to people that I treat in recovery. I said
Yeah.
I'm cheeky prick. I do send that song to some people. But yeah, man.
Yep.
Look, so you've been in. Did you go to 12-step programs, or did you go to detox, or how did you get clean?
Yeah, so I had a family friend who I kind of, towards the end of my addiction, I expressed my issues and my challenges and what I was going through. And luckily, he already had, a decade or more clean, and he went to 12-step groups, and he said, he basically said to me, you don't have to do what I did, because he had used a lot longer than me. He was like in his 50s already. And he was like, Jake, you don't have to do this for another 20 or 30 years. Like, I already did that, and I can tell you exactly how it goes. And he was like, trust me, you don't want to do that. He's like, my life went by that way. I had my kids, my marriage, my career. And he was like, the best thing you can do is, address this now. Like, you're 19 years old. Address this right now. And so that really did, like, it really did impact me a lot, hearing his story and having him, because I didn't know, I hadn't heard anybody's addiction stories. I just hung out with party people. I had never heard addiction stories like this. So when he shared that, I was like, oh, okay, something clicked. And he said, go to a meeting, ask for a sponsor. And there wasn't really, like, these days, there is actually a Marijuana Anonymous specifically for marijuana. But I was doing all kinds of, stuff. It's probably mostly marijuana more than anything, but I was also using all kinds of stuff. So I went to Narcotics Anonymous, and I learned a lot. And the 12 steps as a topic is really interesting to me, because I know, I've met a lot of people who are really, really big advocates of it. And I've met, a fair amount of people also who are totally on the opposite side of the spectrum, where they feel like they don't align with it, or some people even feel like it was harmful for them.
Yeah.
And I think that there's no truth or teaching on the planet that's going to be perfect for everyone, right? But I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I got a lot out of going to 12-step programs, because I think I was listening for what would work for me, but I was also really open to trying on new ideas. But I wasn't susceptible to, like, just believing whatever anyone said either. You know what I mean? So it's like there has to be some balance there of thinking for yourself, but also being willing to let go of your own thinking, which is like kind of a paradox. But for me, I got a lot out of it, like the concept of one day at a time and keep it simple.
Yeah.
Those were so helpful for me. As soon as somebody said keep it simple, and there was also the recommendation basically to give yourself a break. And that was like a revelation for me. The ideas of give yourself a break, keep it simple, and take it one day at a time, those are revolutionary concepts for my anxiety. And because of that, they've served my sobriety, my recovery journey, my self discovery journey, my personal growth, my spirituality, whatever you want to call it. They've served all of that tremendously. So I got a lot out of participating. I did, several years of being involved in 12-step groups. I got a sponsor when I was living in New York, who we never really did any step work. It was kind of like he actually gave me a construction job, and then he uh he kind of underpaid me. Like, it was like I would work a 16-hour day and he would pay me $80.
Oh my
And
God.
I was like, wait, something's not right here. So, but I was a college kid. I didn't really realize that. I don't think he meant to take advantage of me, but looking back, I'm like, oh man, that was not really fair pay. Um, but again, I got a lot out of going to the groups and being around people who were not using and celebrating the fact that they're not using. And that made a big difference for me. And then, I kind of did a little bit of like AA and NA and Al Anon. I would dip into a couple of Al Anon meetings here and there with my mom. Um, and I just feel that there is wisdom in those groups, like a lot of wisdom. I worked through the 12 steps with a sponsor up until step 8. and the pandemic happened. I had service positions at meetings, and I actually kind of gravitated out of those groups because I wanted to find ways to implement more holistic health and mindfulness based practices in the addiction recovery conversation. And so, with almost 10 years clean, I decided to start to kind of innovate and see if I could put some resources together myself to help other people. But I drew inspiration from a lot of different places. Um, and I think that also really leaning into rock climbing and outdoor sports,
Yep.
spending time alone in the wilderness. I got really into backpacking, and I would go, commune with nature in the wilderness, and it would just completely change the whole composition of my being. Like it just transforms me when I go into the mountains. I come back out completely refreshed. So I learned that I could do that, and all these things. I made changes to my diet, nutrition. I got more aware of eating more vegetables and like that more balanced nutrition. All these things have made it a lot easier to keep my mental health in a good place. And so it was really a combination of a lot of things: meditation, breath work. Those tools have helped me tremendously. Um, and there's a group called Recovery 2.0 that I thought was really impactful. That's a yoga based approach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I've kind of, yeah, mixed in a bunch of different things.
Yeah, I do. I've done yoga. I went to India, did meditation. I searched for Christ. I went to Israel, walked the path of Christ.
Oh,
I went to
wow.
Buddhism. I like yoga a lot. I did a lot of yoga when I was younger, a lot of yoga, stanga, and I thought it was great. Did breath work. I still do breath work. I have an ice bath every morning. As soon as I get up, I go and get an ice bath before I do anything
Oh,
else.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I think
First thing
it's
in the
so
morning.
important. Yeah, as soon as I
Yeah.
wake up.
Yeah.
And this is my happy place
Nice.
in the bush. I'm a hunter,
Uh-huh.
but I bow hunt. So I say I'm a bushwalker that carries a bow.
Uh,
And
gotcha.
I walk for hours and I love the bush. And you see that painting behind me?
Yep.
That's an Aboriginal painting done by an old Aboriginal guy up in a place called Ponkerwoy, which is an Aboriginal community. I do a little bit of work with the Aboriginals. I hunt for them and give them food. And that guy there is called the sorcerer. He's the teacher, and that was painted. And he teaches people how to talk to the crocodile, and the crocodile's coming in with the guy on the back, and he's going to give him another spear. They're all giving him spears because that's their gift of saying thank you for teaching me. So that was sort of
Mm,
like a journey that I'm on. I believe I'm a teacher. I don't believe
mm,
I'm anything else but someone who plants seeds.
mm-hmm.
I'm not responsible for anybody else's recovery. I
Right.
just tell them what worked for me. Try this. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else.
Right.
And I don't believe there's one hat fits everybody. And for
Yeah.
me, what you talked about is I mixed lots and lots and lots of things together to make my own cake. Because this is my
Mm-hmm.
recovery. I'm an individual,
Mm-hmm.
and I needed to do yoga. I needed to do breath work. I needed to explore. I had to find out what fitted me and what didn't fit me. And what didn't fit me, I didn't judge. I just said that doesn't fit me.
Right.
You
So
know,
important. Yep.
we're all different sizes.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have different needs and different wants and different beliefs, and that's the beautiful part of the adversity of recovery is that I use the 12-step program as a foundation. That was my car. Then I put mag wheels on it, which was my yoga, and then I put tinted windows on it, which was my breath work, and then I lowered it, which was something else, but the 12-step was my foundation. But is there more to it? My understanding of the 12 steps has changed a lot over the 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
my first step tells me that when I take a chemical, I can no longer guarantee my behaviour.
Mm-hmm.
End of
Mm-hmm.
story.
Right.
Making
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same
yeah.
mistake and expecting different results is the second step. The third step is I can't trust my own thinking. I need to talk to somebody.
Yes. Yeah.
There's the
I
first three
think that's
steps.
brilliant. Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Interpreting the steps in the way that really works for you, I
Yeah.
think is really helpful. And some people I think get really caught up on the language. They're like, I don't like the word powerless, or like they're saying I'm powerless, but I don't think that we should get too caught up on specific words,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of like there's a meaning there to be interpreted, and you can kind of pull from it what you need. And I think of it in different words. When I need to, I change the wording in a way that works for me. And then
100%.
I'm like, okay, great, you know. Um,
I say to people, philosophical bullshit won't keep you clean. The
right.
reality is, there's 69 questions in the first step. But the first step says to me, I can no longer guarantee my behaviour once I put a chemical in my body.
Hmm.
End of story. So I've got
Right.
an allergy to chemicals. So what do you do when you have an allergy? You don't take them.
Right.
That's pretty simple. My
Right.
sane decision today is that I'm not going to pick up a chemical today, no matter what. And some days it is no matter what.
Yeah.
Because putting a chemical in my body is not going to help, no matter what. It's not going to achieve anything of greatness. It's not going to let me be the best person I can be. Because you know yourself, when we're taking chemicals, we're robbing ourselves of our potential.
Mhm.
Even if we run at 75%, I'm just saying, if we're that good, we're running at 75%, that's still 25% we're lacking. I want to be 100%. I
Yeah,
want to be the best
exactly.
version I can be of me today. And you're
Yeah.
at that age now where you're physically strong, you're healthy. Me at 30, me at 50, I was super fit. At 50, I'm 70 now, I'm still healthy. But at 50, I was probably the strongest I've ever been. I was a big guy. I've always trained. I was a boxer. I've done weights. Used to do a lot of running, and I did a lot of what I call calisthenics, body weight, chin-ups, dips, push-ups. I do my push-ups if you do in sets of 150 and do 20, 30 sets a day.
Mhm.
But people said to me, well, how do you do it? And I said, because I'm obsessive compulsive. But so I put my obsessive compulsions into positives.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
still an addict.
Exactly.
I'm still an
Right.
addict, Jake. I'm still got the same personality. I
Yeah,
haven't had a
that's me with rock
transformation.
climbing.
I haven't had a transformation.
Uh-huh.
I still have obsessive. What do you think I'm doing here talking to you? I'm obsessive compulsive. I had a 2-minute break between the last person and you. Then I'm going to hang up for you and I'm going to talk to another guy about recovery. I'm obsessive and compulsive about helping people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think that will ever change. I don't want it to change. I like the obsessive compulsive because I get shit done.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I have
Yeah.
lots of friends in recovery who do fuck all. Sit on their couch, get overweight and complain about being fat and miserable. Oh, I've got nothing. I'm living at my mum's. I'm 50 years of age. Well, get off your ass and go and change it. You're responsible. You're not a victim. None of us are victims, mate. We're responsible. All right. The big question I ask everybody at the end of my podcast is, what is your purpose?
I think right now, I think my purpose is to basically help to reduce suffering in the world. I think the way that I'm really meant to do that I feel called to do that, is to help people heal their relationships with themselves and with other people and
Mhm.
with the earth
Yeah,
and
beautiful
with the
connection.
universe.
Yeah, I believe
All
that too,
those
mate.
levels of relationship. And
Yeah.
so right now, the way that I'm finding an expression of that purpose is by innovating in the addiction space and really bringing in mindfulness and holistic health practices to help people address all areas of life, and to also help people who may not resonate with like the classic image of addiction but still have addictions in their life,
Yeah.
to help people recognize all the different ways that addiction can show up, and and take action to heal those patterns and free themselves from those patterns. Or, like you said, to take their inner drive and channel it into things that are healthy.
Yeah.
I think that as, you know, human beings, we have the potential for really uh, having this all in kind of mentality. And that when that latches on to drugs, it's clearly a problem and it can cause so much damage. But when we latch that on to wanting to help people or to fulfilling our purpose or to something healthy like hunting or climbing, it can really, as you said, really serve us and help us get shit done. So I think, you know, I have a similar purpose to what you've expressed about helping people. And right now, a lot of that has to do with innovating in the world of addiction. Um, yeah, and just bringing mindfulness and holistic health and recreational therapies into the conversation about addiction.
All right, that's beautiful, Jake. Jake Yoder, thank you very much for coming on to the Truth About Addiction. It's been a pleasure
Thank
having
you.
an intelligent conversation with you. Congratulations on your journey, and I wish you many more years of your own personal success. And I call success doing what I want to do without harming others. It's really important not for me not to cause harm and to try to be graceful and humble in my incredible journey through life, which I have the most incredible life in the world. I'm blessed. And I'm one shot away from being a junkie.
Uh-huh.
And that pisses me off. It does. It pisses me off. The fact that I will never, ever regain control of a substance abuse because I'm allergic to chemicals. And I can live with that. I can live with that. But after, you know, being around so long, understanding that I've seen so many people go back at 20 years, 30 years of recovery and start taking drugs again and die in active addiction, I don't want to be that guy. I want to die a clean, helpful, purposeful human being. Jake Yoder, from the Truth About Addiction, thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you so much, Ron, and thank you for the work you're doing in this world. This is awesome, man, to hear a little bit more about your story as well.
Yeah, and
Thanks
as
for
I said,
having me.
mate, I came from a really horrible place. You know, that's my book there, Born to the Lie of Crime. It says life, but I crossed the F out. It's the
Ah,
lie of crime.
clever.
There's a photo of me as a 14-year-old boy holding a Tommy gun in my mum and dad's kitchen
Wow.
with a tailor-made suit on with a machine gun. No, my dad was the real deal. You know, oh, you know, people say, "Oh, my dad was a gangster." No, my dad was a gangster.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Uh-huh.
I shot my first man at 16. You know,
Whoa.
I was involved with the shootout with the police by the time I was 17. And I was in a man's prison by the time I was 17. So for me to come to where I am today, I'm extremely proud of myself, but I'm eternally grateful to a loving God as he may express himself in my life. And I use that word God very loosely because I believe there's only one God, and that's within myself. He's part of the universe, he's part of the earth, he's part of everything we do is my belief system. You know, I don't know. It's too deep. It's too deep for me to go into the religion part. It is. It's way beyond my poor little brain. I'd get a headache if I start to try to work out what's real, because I've searched and I've given up the search because after all these years of searching, I found that what I was looking for was inside of me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to name it. You
Yeah,
know?
it sort of defies logic.
Exactly. Exactly. It's too big.
Yeah.
Bless you, my friend.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, mate.
I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.